Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is RepublicReporters.com here in New York City. We're in to interview with Carlisle Omuna, who was the former Chief Mobilization Officer, CMO, of the National Association of Nigerian Students, known as NANS, from 1992-93 year. Mr. Omuna, in remembering June 12, 1993's presidential election crisis, which was annulled by dictators Ihrm Babangida, no problem with the IBB, he was known as. What role did you play during that turmoil?
Tough question, going back memory lane and remembering our time back in the day in NANS. I served as Chief Mobilization Officer, NANS Nigerian Overseas. During the crisis, NANS called an emergency meeting because of the crisis in the land. A presidential election was conducted by the military government or dictatorship under Ibrahim Babangida, popularly known as IBB, and his cohort, Sani Abacha. Of course, we call it military junta. As dictators, they control the resources, and our role was to call them to action, hold them responsible for the direction the country was going. Over 14 million Nigerians of population went to the polls to choose who will become their president of the country, because the military was claiming that they wanted to hand over to the civilians. And before now, more than 2 or 3 primaries were cancelled or annulled by Ibrahim Babangida administration or regime. So when this happened, when they annulled the election, which was between Bashar Tofa, National Republican Council or Congress, Convention, and Moshood Abiola, PDP at that time, we felt that there was a need to allow the election to run its course and allow the people to count the ballot they already cast. But at the middle of the election, the military annulled the election. We felt it was an affront, it was an insult to 14 million population that went to the polls. So we had an emergency meeting, NANS Nigerian students leaders around the world in Eboma University in Delta, present-day Delta State. And in that meeting, we gave an ultimatum of 1 week that the military should de-annul the election or something will happen in the land, or the students will move in mass protest. So what happened was that they refused to de-annul the election. NANS moved quickly and declared a state of emergency in the country. So I was the mobilization officer, and we began to mobilize. NANS headquarters was based, its mobilization headquarters was based in University of Benin, what is called Uniben, and that was our headquarters. And we quickly moved to mobilize the country. And the turnout was that Babangida had to step aside during that period. So my job was to mobilize the students with my zonal mobilization officer. We have Festus Okeje was there in Zombi and other zonal officers across the country. So we began to mobilize our students to challenge military junta, to challenge military dictatorship in the land. Because we are free people, born of free family and free parents. We have the right to choose our destiny in a land that we call ours.
Thank you. It is well known and easily seen that Nigeria is currently sectionalized or divided by several factions. In the East, you have a faction called Mossab. Can you explain what that is?
Mossab is the movement for actualization of sovereign state of Biafra. I'm going to take you back in the 60s. According to records, there was a civil war between 1967 and 1970. 3.5 million Biafrans were killed in that war. And today, their land and their resources, the gas, the petroleum, the crude oil, are being siphoned and looted by multinational corporations and the military that was controlled by the northern hegemony money or oligarchy in the north. At this time, things were being looted from the east. The oil was being looted. So till today, the whole eastern region has been devastated by oil pollution. Federal infrastructure has collapsed. There are no roads, there are no waters, motorable roads, and joblessness, unemployment, a massive decadence in the land. And that's why have invigorated and woken up again those who believe in Biafra. That they want back their Biafra. They want to be a free people. And to them, that's the best way to go.
There's also a fundamentalist group or faction called Boko Haram. What is that about?
Boko Haram is a fundamentalist movement or militant that believe in Sharia to be their guide. Sharia is based on Quran, and they control almost 16 states in the country. Nigeria is made up of 36 states and Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. And when you control 16 states, almost 16 states, that's a lot by Quran. And they are using by any means necessary. They are bombing states, they are bombing the mosques, they are bombing the churches, they are bombing businesses, they are killing men, women, and children. They don't care. In fact, we feel, according to intelligence that we have, that Al-Qaeda has infiltrated the northern part of the country. Hezbollah currently seems to be in the north. And that's why federal government currently led by Jonathan has declared a state of emergency in 3 states, Yoruba, Adamawa state, and one other state in the country. So that's a problem. So they're bombing and killing, and that's what they do. They believe in Quran. How do you preach your gospel by killing and bombing people, women and children, and destroying businesses? Why can't we call a sovereign national conference to discuss the way forward for the people? Why would we kill each other? Why the bombing of men, women, and children and old people? We think it's an absurdity to engage in such dehumanization and dastard action against your own people.
What of this faction called Ogoni?
Yes, Ogoni is another faction that wants a sovereign state. It's called Ogoni Nation. Ken Saro-Wiwa and Ogoni 9 was were hanged in 1995 by Abacha junta. Shonika was placed here by Babangida, and within 6 months there was a palace coup on gunpoint. Abacha, who was left there by Babangida to protect the Babangida government, his partner in crime, overthrew Shonika and took over, and grabbed Ogoni 9, led by Ken Saro-Wiwa, and placed them in jail. Before you know, they were tried they were court-martialed. Before you know it, November 10 to 1995, they were hanged. We think it's criminal. We think it's injustice. We think it's unfair. We think that people are free to choose their destiny. Ogoni is calling for their own freedom. That's the whole agitation of Ogoni. It has a lot of oil too. And Shell is there looting the oil, and oil spill across the land. Oil spill in the creek. And the land, the farm, the air has been polluted for decades now, and nothing is being done about it. We think it's wrong. We think that these people need freedom, and we support them.
And this other faction called Intl, what is it?
Intl, these are all former part of former eastern region. Intl is also has turned into a militant region of challenging and bombing and killing, carrying arms to challenge the government, and also sometimes those expatriates who are drilling oil we are also getting the crossfire between Ihrm militants and government. But under Yar'Adua administration, before he passed, they gave them amnesty that cost almost 50 billion. They created an Ihrm ministry to address the Ihrm issue. But that seems not to be happening because the 50 billion was pocketed by those who were appointed, who were also government agents. And it doesn't look good in Ihrm either. So they took up arms to ask for 15% that come from their own land. That's what happened about Ihrm movement. It's called Ihrm movement of emancipation of Niger Delta people. For emancipation, yeah.
And the last notable faction is OPC.
OPC, it's in the West. OPC is Odua People's Congress. These are Yorubas. They also want their own region. They want their own freedom. They want their own republic. So you can see what's going on here. Excuse me. It's not like having fortune is a crime. I don't think it's a crime to live separately or have city states and still have what we call confederate states, or a true federalism. Under a true federal established institutions where leaders are held accountable, where infrastructure could be rebuilt or new ones built. But when you live under dictatorship, whether it's democratic dictatorship or military dictatorship, we think it's criminal to subject people under dictatorship of any form, whether it's dictatorship by the civilians or by the military. We reject that. We think it's an affront and it's an obfuscation of power. We challenge that, and we are here to use the tool that we have to confront these criminals.
With all these factions vying for power and situations, and plus multinational corporations maybe causing problems, do you ever think that Nigeria, or do you ever see Nigeria being unified?
That's a tough question. Unification of a nation, of our people, cannot come under criminality, under corruption. It cannot come by coercion, by forcing people to stay together. We believe, or I believe personally, that people should be able to choose their own leaders. Currently, I think that Nigeria is a failed state. What are the elements of failed state? When government has no control over their military, when government has no control over the police force, the police are involved in kidnapping, the police collaborate with kidnappers to kidnap to get their own ransom. When they see that you are rich and you're part of the society, you are somewhere, the police will tip off kidnappers. They will grab you and they will declare that they want 10 million from you if you're a rich person in the land. And then they will go behind with the police officers who were involved. And they will split the money. Police will get some millions of the dollar or naira. And so under such a situation, that state has failed. A land where the university has collapsed, where the lecturer has to ask for bribe to be able to give you your grade. The secondary schools has collapsed. There's no jobs for the youth who are graduating every year. The universities are collapsing. There are no infrastructures. The tools are not there to run institution. It's called a glorified secondary schools. They're no longer universities. Under such circumstance, where the roads are not built, the rails are collapsed, the waters are not running, the planes are falling off the sky, the military are part of Boko Haram according to the President Jonathan administration, the SSS or State Security Service are giving intelligence to Boko Haram to keep where are the target and they're bombing everywhere. How can you call that a state? How can it be unified? I don't think such a state can remain one. I'm seeing a state that is going the direction of disintegration. And the earlier they call for National Sovereign Conference, so that all these people can come together to discuss the way forward for themselves, the better. Otherwise, they are going down the hill. And it's a sorry state.
Mr. Mona, again, as you remember, June 12, 1993, has there been any kind of progressive movement in Nigeria? And if so, who are the progressives?
Thank you, sir. There has been some kind of progressives movement over the years, but mainly based on student union movement. The National Association of Nigerian Students in the 60s pushed the British away. When the British government called to sign a pact, military technical pact with Nigerian after they gained the independence in the 60s, the National Union Organization of Nigerian Students rejected it. And that was how the union or progressives were formed at that time. Record shows that the NUN at that time, which is now NANS, was actually the mechanic that had the mechanic or the motor that triggered or that forced the British to leave the country and hand over government to Nigerians at that time. So as time goes on in the 90s and 80s, it became NANS, and they're still strong. They became several factions. You have the civil liberty at that time led by Olisa Abakoba. You have the Ganefawemi Pari. You also have Olisa Abakoba. You have, I mentioned that. You have Beki Ransom Kuti, the Campaign for Democracy with Chim Mobani, and the Historians and Perfect Peace. You also have Femi Falana and other people who call themselves progressives. But as time goes on, you notice that some of them became selfish, became egotistic. Some of them were collecting money from foreign agencies, and they were all for themselves. If our people or progressive becomes selfish and all for themselves, it becomes very challenging to maintain such progressivism in a society. And at some point, if they cannot unify to have a common front, it becomes very challenging. And recently I read something article where Festo Kiyamo was talking about the progressives, because of their selfishness and ego, abandoned the June 12 movement that actually was almost trying to resurrect the land from the hand of the dictators and juntas to the people because of selfishness. And such self-aggrandizement has caused it to turn into such, junta became sectionalized. That became a Yoruba issue. I remember issues report that coming up from Lagos at that time that some properties and traders' properties were being burnt in Lagos. Why would you burn properties in Lagos? Why would you destroy properties of those who were actually supporting Moshood Abiola? Why would that be the case? So yeah, at the time there was some factions who more or less progressives, but there was no clear leadership. There was no clear guided leadership. So it was stational progressives who were running different agencies for their own selfish end, not necessarily to push for a collective union on the direction of the country, for the development of infrastructure, for development of the land. So it became difficult to actually explain whether there was progressives or not. So what we had was selfish progressivism. It was not a true progressivist. Okay? So if it was a true progressivist, wherever they are, they will continue to champion the cause, regardless of the suffering in the struggle, regardless whether they are benefiting from the struggle or not, regardless whether their parent was killed or their brothers was killed, because you wanted something better for the people. You wanted something solid for the society. You wanted to leave a legacy that someone can look back and say, oh, this will left something that we can continue on. Then you have to bequeath a legacy that this generation can hold on to. But many of us were disappointed that the so-called progressives betrayed and compromised because of their selfish and their ego. They didn't allow them to team up and form a common front that could have helped to propel the land and the people in the right direction to a true democratization of the country.
As the founder of republicreporters.com and the founder of the International Human Rights Monitor, Ihrm, How can you and these organizations fight the corruption and other vices that are currently plaguing Nigeria?
That's a very solid question. The Republic Reporters, basically, our agenda is to stand between civilization and anarchy. Currently, there's anarchy in the land, there's bombing and destruction taking place. Our call to action is to expose and fight corruption, is to let the world know using social media, to lay out the news out there, and have writers, columnists that helps us to do this across the world. The Republic Reporters as a social media has been able to do that, and we feel accomplished to some extent, and we have more work to do. And we call on writers to send in their articles. We call on our fellows to join us on Twitter, on Facebook, on the website, and we believe if we work together as a people that we could be able to make some significant change in the land. We can be able to expose corruption no matter where it's found around the world. That could be accomplished. We'll be able to also speak to powers in their face, to those in power, how we feel by using social media. International Human Rights Monitor has been able to do that by working with other international human rights agencies, by exposing human rights violations in particular. For instance, the Uniport 4, International Human Rights Monitor, championed that and took that to media waves and took that to the White House. We took that to the Nigerian Embassy. We protested. Occupy Wall Street joined us. Occupy DC joined us. We had a lot of people that joined us to protest before the White House, before the Nigerian Embassy at the UN. A lot of people turned that. We feel that is a great accomplishment, and we think that we're moving in the right direction, and that's the way we want it to be. So we want other people to collaborate, and at the other point we join other agencies to work with them to make sure that we're able to bring some of these human rights violations to the front line, so that people, other medias, mainstream medias, to be able to pick these informations up and collaborate with us to be able to bring this, so they'll be able to checkmate these issues within the media industry, social media institutions.
You mentioned a person, or at least an acronym, person MKO Abiola. Who is that?
Oh, okay. MKO Abiola, Moshood Abiola is the alleged winner of the June 12th election. Now remember, the June 12th was not concluded. It was annulled at the middle of the vote is being counted. In some states, the result has been called. In some states, the result was not out. But the results were in. But the military, for selfish reason, annulled it. Now, MKO was not even the issue. The issue was that the June 12th became a rallying point for the nation. We had nothing else to rally around except June 12th. So it became a democratic movement that mobilized the all progressive movement in the land to confront the military. And MKO Abiola was the one at the center of it. He was also a friend of the military at that time. He participated in many of the military coups. He funded them, and the military actually made him rich. So with that money that he had, he was helping in one way or there, became a philanthropist. He established Abiola Babes, he established the Concord newspaper, he established Summit Oil Corporation, Multinational Oil Corporation. Actually, he became a front to the same military that ended up killing him when he was incarcerated. But above all, he also did some good. But at the end of the day, MK Abiola was a politician, a businessman, a friend of the military, a coup plotter who helped to fund the coup plotters in the country. So he has both good and bad baggages for himself alone. So we felt that we wanted him to become the elected leader, but at the end of the day, we would have mobilized against him because he was part of the military and corruption as well. We told them to be able to enthrone a true, clean, those who think that it's more cleaner than MK Abiola and the military dictatorship. So that's what he was. He was a philanthropist, a businessman, a friend of the military, a founder of military coups in the country. but at the same time a philanthropist with the money that he made from the military who funded him. He was also a front of the military. So he has his good and his bad, just like any other person.
Are there any progressive movements or any progressive organizations in Nigeria since the 1993 crisis? And if so, how would you rate them?
It's very challenging to actually pinpoint today progressive movements in what we call Nigeria. Almost all infrastructure, political, economic, social, and otherwise in that country has been compromised. Due to suffering and starvation, people are trying to find a way to survive, and that pushed them into corruption. Even the NANS, I don't know the state of the NANS today. I read somewhere that some of NANS leaders had a gasoline motor accident and 4 of the NANS officials were killed. May their soul rest in perfect peace. There are still people who want to honestly pursue the betterment of the population. But to some degree, many of them have been compromised, unfortunately. But we still think there is a chance in that land to get them. So we still have NANS, but NANS again has been sectionalized. There is NANS in the east, there is NANS in the west, there is NANS in the north, different all kinds of NANS. So that centralized approach or leadership has been compromised because of the sectionalized state of the nation. People are no longer to trust each other. There's lack of trust. There is bitterness. There is past grievances that has not been settled. The issue of people who were killed in the civil war has not been settled. The issue of those, Goni has not been addressed. The issue of Ijos has not been addressed. The issue in the north has not been addressed. The issues in the west has not been addressed. The only few crooks and thieves who are looting are those who are shouting, "Oh, one Nigeria." They don't believe in Nigeria. They don't love Nigeria. That's why people are sectionalized. That's why people believe in going away from such criminal marriage. Some people call it empire of thieves. Crooks running the land. Crooks calling the shots. Crooks leading. Oh my gosh. Why would that be the case? Where are the progressives? Where are they? Let them stand up. Let's be counted. Let's come out and protest. Let's come out in mass and march in the US, in the White House, and Nigerian embassy.